head coach of the Los Angeles Rams in the Autumn Wind Stratomatic Football League. We have just gotten to the mid-season point of our campaign, which means that every team has played 8 games, and now we are on our way to the second half of our season. So I thought it would be a good idea to put together a second half recap show, and perhaps we can do a little preview of what the second half has to offer. So these shows tend to take a long time, and hopefully I can get through this in a little bit over an hour. We'll try to give each team a couple of minutes. We'll take a look at some of the reasons why some teams are doing well and why some of the teams aren't doing so well. Dennis Crowley, who is my friend, and he's a member of this league as well, coach of the Seattle Seahawks, he might be joining us this evening. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get started with our season preview. So I'm going to share this screen with everybody. We're going to put this down. We're going to move this over. So just to give you a little heads up, if you're watching this video and you're not part of this league, this is what we call Autumn Wind. It is a very competitive 30-team league. It's also known as a keeper league, in which there are drafts that take place every year. The general managers trade, they draft, and they make moves every year to try to improve their team or set up their team for future success. Like I said, it's a keeper league, and so the performance of the players on the field that we're playing with this year are based on a card set from the 2016 season. So without further ado, let's take a look here really quickly at the records of each one of these teams at the halfway point. Also, we had a season preview show in which myself and Dennis Crowley put together predictions for each one of these teams, and another league member who does a lot of broadcasts, that's Tom Cook. He also put together a preview show. Excuse me, he jumped into the preview show and basically put together predictions. So we can take a look at the predictions that everybody made for this season, and we'll get a pretty good look at what the teams are doing now and see who's performing well and perhaps who is underperforming. So again, this is a 30-team league, 2 conferences, 3 divisions in each league. And in the AFC, here's 3 divisions that you'll see, and then the NFC, again, there's 3 divisions here. So let's start from the top. Now, I'm just going to go through this basically with teams. I apologize to any of the coaches out there because I've only been a league member for 2 seasons, and I've played a few of these teams, and I know a few of the coaches, but I can't honestly go through here team by team and name you by coach. So I apologize in advance that I'm just going to refer to these as teams this evening. But just let's take a real quick look at the standings. And of course, I do know this coach. Dennis Crowley is one of the people who introduced me to Stratomatic, and he is off to a rousing success. Actually, he is ahead of the pack right now with a perfect 9-0 record, and a look at all of the teams in the league. He is the only team that has not suffered a loss, and he has had some very high-quality wins. This website, by the way, kudos to the people who put together this website. It's really, really well done because they basically have a link for each one of the teams, and that shows their full schedule. And then here you'll see where it'll show wins, losses, and ties. And if you click on the link, it'll actually show you the teams that each of these clubs beat and the clubs that they didn't beat and tied. So, of course, if you click number 9 for Dennis and his Seattle Seahawks, it shows that they have won 9 games, and a lot of these opponents have been very high quality, including the New Orleans Voodoo. Our great coach, there's Tom Cook again there with the Berlin Thunder. But he's had 2 very, very good wins against a Dallas Cowboy team that entered the game undefeated and right now stand at 8-1, and the Houston Texans, who also are 8-1, and they were very close games, as you can see. A win by 2 points against the Dallas Cowboys at home, and the Houston Texans, 20-13. The Houston Texans were the runner-ups in the league last season to Dennis Crowley's Seattle Seahawks, and they're off to a great start at 8-1 this year. Following him, you have Tom Cook, who's coaching the Berlin Thunder, who now stands at 5-4, followed by the Hamilton Tiger Cats at 5-4. And bringing up the rear, the Michigan Panthers and the Oklahoma Outlaws with 3 wins and 2 wins respectively. Moving over to the next division, I believe each one of these has division names. This would be the Knoll division, Chuck Knoll division. We have the Dallas Cowboys, who we'll look at the predictions here in just a moment. But many of us predicted Dallas to be there at the end, certainly among the elite teams in the American Football Conference. The Philadelphia Eagles, however, are off to a terrific start at 6-2 and look like they're well on their way to making the playoffs. That is the San Diego Chargers, who I believe that's Mankiewicz, who coaches that team, who's one of the league head honchos here. He is 5-3. I coach the Los Angeles Rams, who stand at 2-6, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are behind me at 2-8. The third division of the American Football Conference is the Stram, for Hank Stram division. That would be the Chicago Bears, who came to the midway point of the season at 5-3. There's a 2-way tie between the 2 New Orleans clubs, the New Orleans Voodoo and the New Orleans Saints, both standing at 4-4. The St. Louis Cardinals are 2-6, and the Detroit Lions are 0-9. I believe they are one of 2 teams. Nope, actually, Detroit thus far is the only club that has not been able to notch a win. So now let's go over to the National Football Conference, the NFC. And as you can see, the Houston Texans are on top of their division, standing at 8-1. They were the runners-up in last year's Autumn Wind Championship. Interestingly, their quarterback was Case Keenum, which he dealt, and I believe their quarterback, and we'll look here in just a moment, I believe is Dak Prescott. But he's off to a super start this year, and his one blemish has been to the Seattle Seahawks. But right on their tails is the St. Louis Rams, who are 7-1 and only had 1 loss in their campaign, and that was to the Miami Dolphins, 27-24. We'll talk about Miami here in just a moment. They're having a fine campaign as well. The Oakland Raiders are in the mix at 5-3. New England Patriots are holding steady at 4-4. And last place in the division with 2 wins are the Dallas Desperados. That division is called the Lombardi, of course, for Vince Lombardi. The next division would be the George Papa Bear Hallis division, and we'll go to the Walsh division in just a moment. Again, this is the NFC. So this is a pretty even division. Grand Rapids Rampage stand in at 5-3, right now have the lead in the division. There are 2 clubs who are tied with 4 wins, and that would be the Montreal Alouettes and the Carolina Panthers. The New York Jets stand at 2-6, and the Southern California Sun at 1-7. And again, in the Walsh division of the NFC, the San Francisco 49ers stand at 7-1. The Miami Dolphins at 6-2. Shreveport still alive at 4-4. And Cleveland and Phoenix are among the teams battling for high draft positions next year. The Browns with 2 wins and the Phoenix Cardinals with 1. So just a quick glance at some of the predictions that we had at the beginning of the campaign. Dennis and I hosted a show to begin the year. And in his humble opinion, he felt that his club would win 12 games. I thought they were going to win 13. Tom also felt like they were going to win 13 games as well. I predicted a Super Bowl of Seattle over Grand Rapids. Dennis predicted a Super Bowl of Houston over Dallas. And Tom Cook picked a Super Bowl of the Dallas Cowboys over Grand Rapids. So we have some consensus here. It seems that Grand Rapids was mentioned twice, Dallas Cowboys were mentioned twice, Seattle once, and Houston once. And I think that's bearing out actually in the standings. Each of us had pretty similar positions on predictions on Berlin finishing second and Michigan finishing in third. Hamilton finishing in fourth. That's something I did want to discuss as I was looking over these standings. I had predicted the Hamilton Tiger Cats at 10-6, and they are 5-4 currently. So I predicted that this team was going to make the playoffs, and they have a little bit of work to do, but so far they seem to be in the mix. All of us had consensus Dallas winning. In fact, Tom Cook had predicted them, was bold enough to say that they were only going to lose one game all year, which is still entirely possible. We all predicted San Diego to finish second. Interestingly, the Philadelphia Phillies, kudos to their coach, because I don't think any of us saw this coming. 6-2 here at the midway point. And his two losses this season have been to two very difficult teams, the Dallas Cowboys and the San Diego Chargers. So they are performing very, very well, even exceeding all of the expectations of the so-called experts. That would be Dennis, myself, and Tom. The rest of these look like they're according to Hoyle. I had actually predicted Tampa Bay to go 8-8, and they do have a little bit of work to do, as I believe they stand at 2-8. This next division, the Hank Stram division. Now, this one did seem to surprise all of us. In fact, the Chicago Bears right now find themselves on top at 5-3, followed by the Voodoo and the Saints at 4-4. And all of us had predicted a double-digit win season for the New Orleans Voodoo. In fact, I had predicted them to win 12, Dennis 11, and Tom 10. And right now they stand at 4-4. So let's take a look at their performance so far and the schedule that they've played. Again, a tough opponent in Seattle, so that's understandable that they would take a loss there. And a nice win against a very quality San Francisco team. In fact, it was a blowout, 29-7. But they've taken some losses to the division leader, which is the Chicago Bears. And they played Dallas twice, so one understands that that could potentially be a loss, but they also took one to the Michigan Panthers, which is not exactly having a high-quality season. Now, we'll go over each one of these teams and try to make some predictions on what we feel the second half will hold for each one of these clubs. The Houston Texans, again, another team that all of us seem to have consensus that was going to hit double-digit wins. I predicted in the 12. Again, Dennis and Tom headed for 11 each, and they are not disappointing. 8-1. Again, their only loss was to the undefeated Seattle Seahawks. Their schedule so far has not been really that strong. There's a couple of teams on here that have won 5 games, but again, the quality opponents have not been there. Let's see what they're going to do as far as the second half is concerned. Again, 8-1 is off to a great start, and no game is a given on the schedule at all. But in the second half, they will face some playoff teams potentially, including the Raiders and the Hamilton Tiger Cats, as well as the St. Louis Rams. So there are 3 difficult games. If he can navigate his way to 6 or 7 wins toward the end of the season and looks at a 13-win season, that's quite a campaign. But he will have some work to do in the second half. And I think the surprise team is the St. Louis Rams. Now, I underpredicted, and I'm sorry to the coach that I predicted a 7-9 season. My friends Tom, 10 wins, 9 wins for Dennis. Yeah, I think they were a little bit more accurate, but I don't think either one of those two could possibly have seen a 7-1 start for St. Louis. And as we mentioned earlier, his one loss is to a high-quality Miami Dolphins team that has won 6 games. And let's take a look at the quality of his opponents. So the Raiders could potentially be a playoff team. He has a win against them. The Cardinals and Oklahoma Outlaws are not having very good seasons. Berlin Thunder has 5 wins. Carolina, I believe, has 5 wins as well. And Grand Rapids Rampage, in fact, is a 500 or better club. So good job, St. Louis. Excellent first half. As far as the momentum in the second half, what do they have as far as the schedule is concerned? Are they going to be facing some even tougher opponents? They do have a road game, a challenge against the Houston Texans. Seattle is on the schedule as well, and the Houston Texans are actually on the schedule twice, so too is the Seattle Seahawks and the Raiders. So most of the opponents in the second half of their season have 4 wins or more. So let's see if St. Louis can keep up that pace in the second half. And we see the Raiders here at 5-3. I had actually predicted let's see, a 10-win season for the Raiders, 11 wins for Tom, and 11 wins for Dennis. So they are kind of on pace, actually, to meet that. We all believe that the Grand Rapids Rampage were going to have a quality season. Dennis and I, in fact, had 13 wins for both of those teams. And as mentioned below, I believe, and so too does Tom, that Grand Rapids will be playing in the Uber Bowl final, though Tom said he would win 10 games this season. So if we look, they are off to a 5-3 start, so it's a little slower than what we thought. But when you look at the losses, those are 3 very, very good teams. An 8-1 Houston Texans team, a San Francisco team that has won, I believe, is on top of their division as well. The Walsh division at 7-1, I believe. We'll look in just a moment. And the St. Louis Rams also 7-1. So kind of a tough part of the schedule for them. We'll take a look a little bit later and see what they have for the second half. But the rest of that division right now playing pretty mediocre. Montreal Alouettes, Carolina Panthers, both at 4-4. But there's a chance that two of those with 5 wins in the second half can find themselves in the playoffs. And, of course, the Jets and the Sun at the end of the pack. 2 top quality clubs in the Walsh division, as we mentioned, the San Francisco 49ers with only 1 loss, and that was to the New Orleans Voodoo, who only stand at 4-4 but have a quality club and would like to think that in the second half that they're going to make a run. The Miami Dolphins also having a great season. Their 2 losses have been to Shreveport and to New Orleans. And again, 4 wins, and I believe Shreveport has 5 maybe. Let's take a look here. Where are you, Shreveport Steamer? Oh, there they are, 4-4. So again, looking at the predictions there, we all had consensus that the Niners were going to win that division. In fact, I felt that they were to win 13 games. My compadre said 12 and 10, and all of us felt like the Miami Dolphins would finish in second, and right now the standings seem to bear that out. And bringing up the rear, the Cleveland Browns and the Phoenix Cardinals. One thing when I reviewed this schedule was the number of teams with only 1 win and 2 wins, and I do not bring this up to upset anybody because I am among those teams, in fact. But right now, at this point of the schedule, at the midway point, we have a grand total of 5 NFC clubs with only 2 wins or less, and another 5 clubs in the AFC with 2 wins or less. It's going to be a race to the finish for those top few picks. I'm sure it's not for a lack of trying. And again, we'll take a look at each one of those clubs. I'm sure there's some deficiencies on each one of these teams that have nothing to do with coaching. And again, sometimes your roster just is not built to compete, and you're playing for the future and playing a lot of younger players and hoping that their talent catches up in the NFL and it is reflected on their cards. So we've taken a look at the predictions. So let's take a quick look at some of these clubs and how they've gotten there. So Seattle Seahawks, again, this is a 9-0 club, and of course I do know the coach, and that is Dennis Crowley. They are led by Russell Wilson, and taking a look at his first half campaign. Now the Seahawks have played 9 games. Just a so-so season for Russell the Muscle, actually. He's only completing 53% of his passes, 12 touchdowns, but look at that, 11 interceptions to go along with it. So you wonder, mediocre quarterback, first part of the season, has turned the ball over more than once a game. So where are they winning their battles? Well, look no further than Stratomatic Superman Spencer Ware, who always have a high-quality card. It's very dangerous to guess wrong on his card because he has so many short gains. And look at that per carry average, 5.2. He's quite the weapon, not only in terms of ground gains, but also through the air. As you can see, Dennis has no less than 6 players that are averaging over 10 yards a catch, and 5 of those players have at least 2 catches per game. As you can see, there's Golden Tate with 16 catches on the season. He does utilize his tight ends. He has 35 catches for Greg Olson and another 22 for Gary Barnidge. So, he runs that 2 tight end set. And, of course, he has an outstanding deep threat in Deshaun Jackson, who is averaging 18 yards per catch. Only 22 catches, but 18 yards per catch, including a 63-yard reception. He leads the club with 4 touchdowns. So pretty nice performance for Dennis, considering his quarterback has not exactly been leading the way, not too efficient. But if you look no further at the point disparity, they have scored 211 points, which basically puts them on an average of about 22, 23 per game. But it's the points against that look amazing. 9 games played, 99 points against. That's only 11 points per game. I am patting myself on the head for the outstanding math that I can do on the fly. But, look no further than that. There's your answer. Why is Dennis atop the division? Why is Dennis 9-0? 99 points in 9 games. So an outstanding performance for Dennis. In the second half, his opponents include Michigan, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, New England Patriots. In the fourth quarter of the season, he will face his friend Tom Cook with Berlin. St. Louis, I don't know if that's the Cardinals. I'm assuming that's that actually might not be the Cardinals. I'll have to clarify that. They do take on Carolina, and they do take on Michigan. So their schedule does not really intimidate in the second half. It is the St. Louis Rams. So again, mark your calendars for that game. Hamilton Tiger Cats could give them some fits because they are on the road. But the St. Louis Rams game on the road, that's the one that we'll want to watch. And hopefully maybe we'll get a chance to broadcast that one. I tried to broadcast the game, this fantastic game that he had against the Dallas Cowboys, just an awesome game against 2 teams who at the time were undefeated. Dallas stands 8-1 right now, and Seattle's 9-0. And I had broadcast this game, but apparently I messed it up. I didn't press the button right or whatever, and I missed out. And unfortunately, everybody missed out on a great contest. And I'm sorry that everybody missed it, but it was a super game, 15-13 for Seattle. At home against the Dallas Cowboys, and sorry we missed that one. But again, in the second half, I see the St. Louis Rams as giving him some trouble, and perhaps on the road against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Again, Tom Cook is an outstanding coach, so it would be very difficult for them to be able to beat such high-quality opponents that consistently through the rest of the season. He basically has defeated the top teams, but can he do it one more time, and especially on the road? So I'm going to, my prediction initially for his club was 13-3, which if you look, it's pretty daggone close. I'm going to go ahead and keep that prediction. I'm going to bump it up a little bit, and I'm going to suggest that he's going to finish the season 15-1. A very real possibility for him to go undefeated for the rest of the season, but I'm going to assume that one of those games may be to Hamilton or St. Louis. It would be hard-pressed to see him get past all three of those teams, Hamilton, Berlin, and St. Louis. So I'm going to give him one loss, so I have him at 15-1. So now we look at the Berlin Thunder, and that, again, is coached by Tom Cook. So the signal caller for this team is Andrew Luck. So right off the bat, you know he's going to be looking for a new quarterback next year. He will not toss a single pass. So when the Berlin Thunder take the field, Tom will have a decision to make as to whether or not he wants this team to compete, or if he decides to perhaps blow the team up and start all over again and come through with draft picks. He is completing nearly 60% of his passes. But there's another player with 13 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. So a turnover a game plus for Andrew Luck. On the ground, just so-so production. Basically, he has a two-headed monster back there between C.J. Anderson and Christine Michael. But as you can see, their per-carry averages look pretty strong, especially Christine Michael at 4.9 per carry. He also has a low-usage running back in Tyreek Hill, who is averaging 6.8 per carry. So it's running back by committee in their backfield. Another tight end is leading his club in reception, and that is Zach Miller with 53 catches and 4 touchdowns leads their club, and that would be Nick O'Leary, another tight end, and the rookie Tyreek Hill, who's having an outstanding season again for the Chiefs. So I have an even better card, and of course he's a weapon in special teams as well. So the Berlin Thunder have scored 227 points, but they've also allowed 219 points. So they're a relatively strong offense, but they do have a vulnerability and they do let up some points. Let's look at their schedule the rest of the way and we'll come up with a prediction. So Berlin stands at 5-4. They have started the second half of the season, and they did so with a win against the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who came into that game 5-3. That was a home game, so it was a nice win. Down the stretch, they have a very tough schedule. They do have the Hamilton Tiger Cats on the road, so let's see if the Tiger Cats can turn that around. They do have the Philadelphia Eagles, who are 6-2, and the undefeated Seattle Seahawks. New England Patriots, they host them at home. They're 4-4. So they stand at 5-4 right now. I say that he will win the majority of these games. I believe that he will come on top with 4 more wins and will finish 9-7. So I'm going to adjust my prediction for the Berlin Thunder, which I said was 8-8. I think they're going to outperform, and I believe they will finish 9-7. And when I am done, I will post these online, and of course I'll add up things, so it's very possible that I gave people too many wins. So we'll try to make the math work. But that's where I see the Berlin Thunder. I think that they will win 1 more than I predicted, and we will put them at a record of 9-7. So the next club in the Shula division, this would be the AFC, I would assume the East. We'll just call it the Shula division. These teams are flipped around every year. You don't play in the same division twice. There's a method to their madness, but let's talk about the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Now, I remember in my predictions for Hamilton, I believe that they were going to win 10 games, and they do stand at 5-4. So let's take a look at their club and see how their players are performing. So Hamilton is led by Eli Manning. And again, this will be the last card for Eli Manning, as he is no longer going to be a New York Giant, and is basically, his career is riding off into the sunset. And here's another player. These quarterback stats look like quarterback stats from the 60s and 70s when the pass interference rules were so loose. 9 touchdowns, but 13 interceptions for Eli Manning. He does have Carlos Hyde, who is off to a great start. Look at that, 5 yards per carry for Carlos Hyde. His another tight end. Look at this, a third team in a row with their tight end as their leading receiver, and that would be Jack Doyle with 54 catches and 439 yards. 6 touchdowns leads the club, and that is Doug Baldwin, the veteran receiver from the Seattle Seahawks. Hamilton is fairly limited on offense. They've only scored 152 points in 9 games, and clearly that's under 20 points per game. They've actually allowed more points than they've scored, and yet they have a winning record. So let's see how exactly that's come about. So here we are with Hamilton. I'll look at their schedule. So their wins have been against Michigan, Tampa Bay, a nice win against Chicago, who is on top of their division, the Detroit Lions, who are winless, Dallas Desperados, have only 2 wins, and actually one of them happens to be against Hamilton. So that wasn't exactly a very good loss for Hamilton, and it was at home, too, on top of that. But they were able to beat the Oakland Raiders, a close loss to the New England Patriots, a close loss to the Oklahoma Outlaws, who also have only won 2 games, and a big loss to the Berlin Thunder. So an interesting club, considering in their first quarter, they won their first 4 games. And Michigan has an okay team, and Chicago Bears do have a high-quality team. Tampa has only 2 wins out of 10 games, and Detroit hasn't won a game. So they may need some help on the schedule, and looking at this, they're going to have trouble getting it. They are going to be facing 4 of their opponents are on tops of their division, basically, top of their division. The Seattle Seahawks, they're going to have to face them twice. They also face the Houston Texans on the road. They have another game against the Berlin Thunder, which they lost 29-7. And they have a game against the Dallas Cowboys, who are 8-1. This is going to be a punishing schedule. They have a lot of work to do if they expect to go 9-7 and make the playoffs. And again, not trying to offend anybody with this, but that schedule looks a little too daunting to me. They stand at 5-4 right now. I would anticipate this team probably will go 8-8. I'm going to give them an 8-8 record. I initially had predicted them at 10-6. My colleagues had predicted them at 7-9 and 8-8, and I think they're going to be more right than I was. I will say 8-8. Lastly, we're going to go to the Oklahoma Outlaws. Dennis and I picked Oklahoma at 6-10. Tom picked them at 9-7. So let's take a look at that club and see where they are and how they got there. I'm sorry, for whatever reason, I keep opening up the game. Okay, so Oklahoma Outlaws, very much offensively challenged. 8 games, 131 points. They've allowed 178, so they've kept the margins close, but only 2 wins, and probably that lack of offensive production has a lot to do with that. They are led by the Red Rifle, Andy Dalton, who is not completing 50% of his passes. I tell you, just as an aside, I am in several leagues, and this league is highly competitive, to say the least, especially when you have 30 teams, and it's very difficult to stockpile talent. You have to go years and hit right on your drafts and make the right trades, and it takes a while to get good at this, I can tell. And I love that challenge. And so you don't see a lot of overinflated stats, and we're seeing it right now in the quarterbacks. We've had this is the 5th team that we've reviewed, and while he does not have double-digit interceptions, he only has 5 touchdowns, and again, more interceptions than touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and only a 49% completion number. So again, this league is not for the faint of heart. But have no fear. When the the red rifle is shooting blanks, you have Jordan Howard, the all-star, all-pro, all-rookie, all-everything back from the Chicago Bears, who, a lot of teams would pass on a running back because the lifespan of a quality running back in the NFL is not great. But it looks like Oklahoma is going to be rewarded because Jordan is having a terrific campaign this season as well. His per carry average is not quite what it was last year, but he's just eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark and looks to finish with 12 or 1,300. So again, he'll have a quality card. We're at the midway point, 196 carries, so nearly 25 carries a game for Jordan Howard and 948 yards. So he has an outside shot at a 2,000-yard campaign. And look at this. Andy Dalton with 25 carries. He's a quarterback, so a lot of those came on must runs or maybe line bucks. Matt Asiata, I believe his name is, 3 carries. That's the only other back that has carried. Basically, Jordan Howard has carried every running back carry with the exception of 2 this season. We do not play with injuries, so if you have a back that's a workhorse, it's very possible that your second running back isn't even going to see the field, and that is the case here. So a fine season for Jordan Howard. He also has 7 touchdowns. And looky here, he also leads the team in receptions with 28. His average per catch, though, not very good at only 5.4. He does have one deep threat on this team. That's Brandon LaFell, who is averaging 15 yards per carry, has a 70-yard catch. He also leads the team with 2 touchdown receptions. So Oklahoma in last place at 2-6. Let's take a look at the rest of their schedule and make a prediction. So in the second half, the Outlaws in their first quarter, well, look at there. He's going to play me, so there's a win. Michigan Panthers just playing so-so ball. St. Louis Cardinals just playing so-so football. He is visiting the Berlin Thunder, who is 5-4, and the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who is 5-4. The Raiders, who I believe are 4-4. Dallas Desperados, Michigan Panthers. Now, this is an interesting schedule. I am not suggesting at all that this club is going to turn it around and go 7-1 and make the playoffs, but I see some wins here. So I'm going to take it easy and not go crazy on this, and I'm going to suggest that they're going to win 4 games. They're going to split this second half. This is not as bad a team as their 2-6 record, because in those first 6 games, if you look, those are some very high-quality opponents. And they were able to beat their division rival Hamilton Tiger Cats, who are 5-4. And they did have a win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But as you can see, the losses are to some quality clubs: Berlin Thunder, Seattle Seahawks, undefeated. Seattle Seahawks, again, undefeated, and wasn't close in either. Well, actually, in one of those games, he was. He only lost it by 3 when he hosted Seattle. A very close loss to the St. Louis Rams. So as you can see, these are not blowouts at all. There's another 4-point loss, a 6-point loss. Only really 1-2 blowouts here. This is a better club than 2-6, so I'm going to say they're going to split, and they're going to go 6-10, and they're going to match my prediction. Tom had predicted them at 9-7, and Dennis had predicted them at 6-10. I'm going to hold to 6-10. Mark LePage is the coach of the Dallas Cowboys. I had predicted them with 13 wins. Dennis as well, 15 for Tom. Very, very good club. I did have the occasion to play them this year, and I felt unusually lucky that I was actually winning at the half, or close to winning at the half. I was actually winning after 1 quarter, and I took a screenshot picture. I was so enamored with the fact that somehow I was actually beating who I believe was one of the top clubs in the league. So let's take a look at their club. One of the biggest offseason acquisitions in the league. They picked up Drew Brees. They made a lot of moves. In fact, I made a trade with them for wide receiver Chris Hogan. And let's take a look at their club. It is a stacked roster, to say the least. Again, Drew Brees. Drew Brees is completing 62% of his passes, 17 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. So finally, we've seen a quarterback without double-digit interceptions and is having a fine season. But speaking of which, not only is he doing it through the air, but now we have David Johnson, who again also is injured this season, so he's going to have to look to make a big-time move. But again, if you're able to get Drew Brees, we'll see if he has the assets to get a top-quality running back. So David Johnson, of course, he's do it all. Basically, he has the overwhelming majority of touches on this team. Not only 230 carries in 9 games for 1,174 yards. So again, there's another running back with a chance at 2,000 yards. But he also has 78 catches for 602 yards. So he could join Marshall Faulk in NFL history as one of only a couple, I believe, running backs who have 1,000 yards out of the backfield catching and 1,000 yards on the ground. So he's well on his way to that. So, and look at that, 7 touchdowns on the ground, 7 through the air. If we were having MVP right now, I'd have to take a look at the rest of these, but David Johnson would have to be leading the way. They have scored 244 points. That's a pretty high-powered offense in 9 games. And they've only allowed 109. In fact, that is the 3rd fewest in the league, but they have played 9 games. So on a per game average, I'd say that that's probably in the top 2 or 3. As it turns out, the New Orleans Voodoo have allowed only 89 points in 8 games. So Dallas stands at 8-1. Their lone loss was to the Seattle Seahawks. And one wonders when the NFC Championship takes place if those 2 clubs will be battling it out again for the right to play in the Super Bowl. So predictions. Dallas Cowboys, 8-1. Let's look at their schedule the rest of the way. So the San Diego Chargers, who are one of the surprises, I believe, of the league this year. They are 5-3, a quality club. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they defeated them rather easily, 28-14. They also take on my Los Angeles Rams, who they pretty much destroyed 38-14 early in the season. Grand Rapids Rampage, again, one of those difficult games for the Rampage in the second half. A very high-quality team in the Philadelphia Eagles. They have the Chargers on the schedule twice. They will play Tampa Bay once again, which they pretty much throttled early. And there's Hamilton once again. So predictions. 8-1 for Dallas. I see the Eagles could give them fits. I say the road game against San Diego, that could give them fits as well. The rest of these teams look like they should be able to overcome. So I'm going to say they're going to split those games, and we will go to 14-2. So I'm going to up my prediction by 1 for the Dallas Cowboys, which Tom predicted a 15-1 season for Dallas, and that's entirely possible. So let's go to those San Diego Chargers in their division. All 3 of us had winning records for San Diego. In fact, Dennis believed that this team was going to win 11 games, and right now they stand at 5-3, so they have an outside shot at that mark. So San Diego, let's see what they bring to the table. And we'll get back to the Eagles here in just a moment. I skipped them accidentally. So they are led by Colin Kaepernick, who, again, he's going to have to find another quarterback, as it appears Colin Kaepernick will not throw a single pass this year. He certainly will not meet the 100 pass attempt deadline should he be picked up by a team toward the end of this year, and I highly doubt that. 7 touchdowns and 6 interceptions for Colin Kaepernick. Of course, he's done a lot of his damage with his legs. A 7-yard per carry average, 63 carries, in fact, for 434 yards. Le'Veon Bell, I'll bet you anything, and I was right. He would lead the team not only in carries, but also catches, and he does. A good start. 4.4 yards per carry average, only 1 touchdown on the ground and 1 through the air. But as you can see, he's had the lion's share of the carries. Colin Kaepernick is averaging about, that looks like a lot actually, about 7 runs per game as well. Not a lot to be scared about. Le'Veon Bell with 33 catches for 241 yards. They do have one interesting player on this team, and this is Marquise Goodwin. Look at this stat line, 13 catches Their leading receiver, yards-wise, 460 yards. In fact, it's almost twice as much as anyone else. And on only 13 catches, basically. So bombs away to Marquise Goodwin, 35 yards. Look at that lofty 35 yards per catch. Wow. So right now they stand at 5-3. Let's take a look at the San Diego Superchargers schedule in the second half and see where this season goes. So the Chargers 5-3. Let's look at their schedule. Dallas Cowboys, New Orleans Saints. Those are two tough matchups. They have Dallas on the schedule twice, in fact. One home, one on the road. But the rest of these are very much winnable games. Los Angeles Rams, twice on the schedule. So poor team, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's definitely a winnable game. New York Jets not having a very good season either. Montreal and New Orleans both standing at 4-4. Good coaches. But those definitely are winnable games. But two Dallas games staring you right in the face. So I'm going to suggest that he's going to split one of those two 4-4 games. He'll win out the rest of the games who are under 500, the teams against which are under 500. The Dallas Cowboys. Well, I'll tell you what. My prediction for San Diego will be, I'm going to give them 5 wins in the second half, and that'll make it up to 10. That was my prediction at the beginning of the year. I'm going to stick with it. I will keep them at 10 wins. They're 5-3 now. So Seattle. I'm sorry. I skipped right over Philadelphia. I'm sorry. The Eagles, 6-2. We'd mentioned their losses were to those San Diego Chargers, and they lost to the Dallas Cowboys, but both of them were very close games. 5-point loss to San Diego and a 3-point loss to the Dallas Cowboys. So let's take a look at their club. And the Eagles are led by quarterback Kirk Cousins, who is completing 60% of his passes. So that's a good mark. And look at this, 21 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. So slow your roll, Michael. There seems to be a quarterback in the MVP mix, and that guy's name is Kirk Cousins at 6-2. So a lot of the success is thanks to that great quarterback. And he also has a quality running back in Ryan Matthews, who will not be carded this year, but he had a fine card last year, and he's averaging 4.8 per carry. And Ryan Matthews also has another 22 catches out of the backfield. He's a pretty good receiver out of the backfield. But his leading receiver, lo and behold, once again, Antonio Gates. But look what's second. Look who's second. Kyle Juszczyk. I know I butchered that pronunciation. Tom does that one better than me. With 42 catches. So you have to go all the way to the 4th receiver with J.J. Nelson and Will Fuller with 17 catches. So I find that very interesting. That's a pretty mediocre set of wide receivers, but he's getting it done with little quick dinks and dunks to his backfield mates. And the ageless wonder, future Hall of Famer, Antonio Gates. Okay, so that's their quality players on offense. Now let's make a prediction. So the 6-2 Philadelphia Eagles. I got a chance to spectate and should have broadcast if I'd just known which button to press. A great game against the Dallas Cowboys. 2017 loss. So their other loss was to San Diego. So let's look at the second half. So Tampa Bay, probably a win. Carolina Panthers, that's a decent opponent, but we'll take a look at that in just a moment. On the road to Berlin Thunder, that's going to be a rough one. Los Angeles Rams, that's a win. On the road to Dallas, they'll have a real hard time with that. Although, again, it was a good, close fight, 20-17, but that was at home. We'll see what they do on the road. Grand Rapids Rampage. Southern California Sun with only 1 win. Tampa Bay with only 2 wins. Los Angeles Rams with 2 wins. So there are some wins here, definitely. So and there's Tampa Bay again. So there's 4 right off the bat. I say they probably will have a hard time with Dallas. There. I'm going to give them 5 wins. in the second half. So I believe Philadelphia will finish with 11 wins, which, if they do that, is going to outpace everyone's prediction. 9 wins for Tom and Dennis and 8 wins for me. So Philadelphia does it. Congratulations. You have basically outpaced all of our predictions. Just as an aside, one of the stories that we've not talked too much about this team, they are a high-powered offense with 235 points scored in only 8 games, but it's their defense, 144 points. That's pretty fair. That's not bad at all. So that's a great point differential and probably among the best in the league. Certainly if you're getting up to 100 at the halfway point of the season, you know you're doing something right. Okay, we're going to skip over. Well, no, let's go ahead and do it. This is going to be painful. This is my club, the Los Angeles Rams, which stand at 2-6. I can tell you the wins that I've had have been ugly, and the losses I've had have been uglier, and there is nothing pretty about this. My quarterback is Bryce Petty. If this broadcast is a time capsule, I will tell you that Bryce Petty here in 2017 is going to make starts for the New York Jets in their last 3 games because their quarterback, Josh McCown, was injured in a game, broke his non-throwing hand, and it appears that Bryce Petty is going to come bouncing off the bench and supposedly is going to start the last 3 games. At this point, he has only thrown 8 passes for the entire season, but if he's able to log 100 passes, he will be eligible to play. I don't know how to feel about that, to be quite honest with you, because this season has been an absolute disaster, and there's a reason why Bryce Petty sits the bench, and I'm starting to figure it out. 8 touchdowns. Hey, that looks great. Now let's get over to the ugliest number. 19 interceptions. I could not be more prouder. Like a proud papa in the stands, a Little League dad, I proudly wear Petty on the back of my name and say, that's my boy. He has single-handedly thrown flat pass interceptions that have cost me 2 games at least this season. He has successfully also snatched defeat from the jaws of victory on a couple of occasions. Not pretty. You never know, though. There are 100 pass quarterbacks, Jimmy Garoppolo, for example, that actually turn out to be quality cards. So let's see if he can turn it around in the last 3 games. I have my doubts, but he could be my quarterback next year. So as much as I would like to think Mitch Trubisky or Deshaun Watson or Pat Mahomes could fall into my lap, I have to be prepared with another quarterback, and that quarterback could be Bryce Petty. One interesting thing about this season for my team, though, is the performance of Rob Kelly, and that's also a sad story because his card next year isn't going to be nearly that good, but he has definitely been a workhorse for my team, gaining 690 yards here at the midway point and a robust 5.1 yards per carry, including I hit a 56 on his card early in the season. Needless to say, his bench doesn't scare anybody. Teron Ward, Grimes not even in the league anymore. Adrian Peterson will be carded next year. He's having a so-so season for Arizona, so I will have a running back next year. What I'm proud of, though, is the performance of Des Bryant, who, again, is having a really, really nice year with 55 catches. Unlike the rest of the league, I'm trying to throw to my wide receivers. So as you can see, Perriman with 25 catches and Bryant with 55. And there's Lance Kendrick, who now plays for Green Bay. He does have 35 catches. But a nice per catch average for Perriman at 15 per. But already I'm starting to see some cracks in Perriman being hurt for nearly all the year. He's not going to have a good card. Rob Kelly battled injuries all year. He's not going to have a good card either. My number 1 draft pick was Joey Bosa. And Bosa has 5 sacks at the midway point. And he's had some very timely sacks that have led to wins. So it's a rebuilding effort, to say the least. My wins have come against Tampa Bay, a 14-3 win, and a 19-7 win against the winless Detroit Lions. So I'm proud to have those wins, but again, the teams I was playing was at or below as far as our skill level was concerned when it comes to these players. Unbelievably, I may have a better quarterback than either one of these two teams, and they caught some bad breaks too. I very easily could be 0-8. It's not for coaching; it's just for a lot of luck, to be very honest. In the second half, I will take on Oklahoma, a San Diego team that will undoubtedly throttle me, a Dallas team that beat the bricks off of me, a Philadelphia team that will probably crack my skull open, a Tampa Bay team that I did defeat, Tom Cook, one of the masters of this game. I'm sure he's going to take me to school. San Diego once again. I can't imagine a win there. And then I believe that's the New York Jets. So my prediction for the season, I think I undersold it, either that or Tom and Dennis like me personally. I had predicted 2 wins. They had predicted 3, and they had predicted 3. Actually, I believe I'd even predicted 1, and Dennis maybe changed it to 2. I'm going to say down the stretch, I will probably win 1 more. So I'm going to up mine by just 1, but only by 1. And we'll see if Dennis and Tom are correct that I do wind up with 3 wins. So we'll go to Tampa Bay now. Again, no offense to anyone, but this one is surprising to me. They stand at 2-8. And as we can see, I'm not the only one who is surprised, because I may have over-predicted just a tad. I like the club, and I believe that they were going to win 8 games. As it turns out, they have very little chance of doing that unless they win every game down the stretch. But even Tom and Dennis had predicted them with 6 wins, and it appears that they've got some work to do down the stretch to get to that mark. So let's take a look at their club. And again, when you have Ryan Fitzpatrick at the helm, what are you going to do except do what Bryce Petty does, and that's throw interceptions. He has 8 touchdowns and 14 interceptions, so obviously turnovers are a problem. I played this club. Matt Forte just could not get out of his own way. But if you look here in this first half, 700 yards at the midway point, that is very, very nice. He's well on his way to a 1,000-yard campaign. Now, this is through 10 games, but he also has a nice backup in Derrick Henry, who has a very good card. His leading receiver is Kenny Britt, who's been in a lot of trouble this year in real life, and he's only averaging 9.8 per catch. There's Kelvin Benjamin with a 13-yard per catch average, so that looks pretty good. And he's got Jimmy Graham, who has a couple of touchdown passes caught. So let's look at their second half and see what we can predict for Tampa Bay. So they've already played 2 games, and they did wind up getting their second win, and that was against the winless Detroit Lions, 27-7. And they played a very close game early on to Dallas, but they lost that game 28-14. Actually, I may not be right on that. Let's see. Well, it was 7-7. I may have misread that. So they lost 28-14 to the Dallas Cowboys. Down the stretch, they have another quality opponent, 2 quality opponents in the Chargers and the Eagles, a 4-4 club in the Voodoo. In fact, they play the Cowboys twice and the Eagles twice. They've already lost to Dallas. They visit the Rams. They also will host the Voodoo. Let's see. I say they will finish. I think they'll get 2 more wins off that schedule. I think that they'll beat the Rams on the road, and I believe they will upset the Voodoo at home. So I'll give them 2 more wins. So that'll give Tampa Bay 4 for the year. So now we will travel to the Hank Stram division, and this is where the New Orleans Voodoo, all 3 of us had predicted the New Orleans Voodoo as the top team in that league, but right now it is the Chicago Bears. Now, all of us predicted that Bears would go 500 or better, but I don't think anyone thought that Chicago would stand atop the division at 5-3. But it is early, and there is a big pack at the top. 5-3 for the Bears. Both New Orleans teams are 4-4, so those will be the factors. Probably only one playoff team will come out of this. So the Bears. Let's take a look at their club. So they are led by Marcus Mariota. And Mariota right now has thrown 9 touchdowns and has only 7 interceptions, but he's also very dangerous on the ground, though he only has a 3.6 per carry average. But pardon me. There right now is the reason why you stand at 5-3, and that would be Ezekiel Elliott with a 5-yard per carry average and 172 carries. In fact, only 9 carries have gone to any other running back, and that is Eddie Lacy. And Elliott also has 20 passes out of the backfield for an 11-yard per catch average. That's outstanding. They have 1 star at receiver, and he's a big star. That's Odell Beckham. Of course, he faced a huge injury this year, so he'll have some work to do as far as picking up some wide receivers for next year. But Emmanuel Sanders also is having a nice season. Look at that, the top 2 receivers with 14.2 and 13.1 yards per catch. So the Bears so far this season, 159 points scored in their 5 games, and they've only allowed 136. Looking at the second half of their season, let's take a look at their opponents and see if they will be able to maintain that lead down the stretch. Okay, so the Bears 5-3. So down the stretch, they have the Phoenix Cardinals. Very winnable game. They're going to do the New Orleans two-step, hosting the Saints and the Voodoo this quarter, along with the St. Louis Cardinals. So I can see 2 wins there right off the bat and a split between the Saints and the Voodoo. The Cleveland Browns, Detroit Lions, neither one of those teams, 2 teams are playing very well. There's a visit on the road to the Saints and the Miami Dolphins. So I see some good stuff happening for this team. I see at least 5 wins down the stretch for this club. I'm going to give them 5 wins. It could very well easily be 6, though, no question. But I'm going to give them 5 wins. And if they do that, that will match what Tom Cook had predicted with 10 wins. I had him at 8 wins, 9 wins. But either way, I do see this team as a playoff club. So next, we'll talk about the New Orleans Voodoo. Now, I expect a big second half from them. I would hope so because I predicted them to win 12 games. So I'd like to think that my prediction is going to hold true. I don't think they're going to go 8-0, but let's see if they can make their way to the playoffs. But first, let's find out why they are 4-4. In fact, all of us had predicted New Orleans with double-digit wins, so they have a little bit of work to do here in the second half. So on the surface, we can see they're scoring a lot of points. Well, no, I'm sorry. It was the Saints, 146 points, and they've only allowed 89. Well, there's got to be something in this schedule that has led to this. So let's take a look here. Their quarterback, well, they've got a tandem here of Jay Cutler and Cam Newton. Now, Newton has actually thrown more touchdowns than interceptions, 10 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. And Latavius Murray is off to an outstanding start. In 8 games, he has 820 yards on the ground, 5.3 yards per carry. That is fantastic. Reserve Matt Jones also is averaging 4.5 per carry. Latavius Murray also has caught 36 passes out of the backfield. Their leading wide receiver would be Allen Robinson with 25 catches for 275 yards. So on the surface, this looks like a very good team. And with only 89 points allowed, one wonders, how could this club be 4-4? So let's take a look. Maybe they've had a tough schedule. So, well, right off the bat, you see Seattle, and that's a tough loss there. Home game to Seattle, they lost 10-7. They also lost a very close one to the Michigan Panthers, 23-19. They won a close one to a mediocre St. Louis Cardinal team at 13-7. They went on the road, and that's a signature win there, 29-7 win over the San Francisco 49ers. But there's another close loss, 7-10 to the Bears. There's an easy win against the Browns. There's an easy win against the Cardinals. And a close but no cigar loss to the Cowboys. So if we look at this club, the most points that they have allowed in any game, interestingly, was to the Michigan Panthers, who scored 23 on this club. But everybody else, there's a shutout, there's a 6 points, there's 7 points, a couple of 10s, and 11 and 15. This team's going to be better in the second half. I feel very confident about that. Just how much better? Hard to say. They've not played their division mates, New Orleans Saints, yet, and that team is 4-4. So I figure they will probably split one of those two. But of the rest of these games, they have the Lions. They have the Lions twice. They have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the St. Louis Cardinals, which, again, that was a close one, but they should be able to handle their business at home. Shreveport Steamer at home. So I believe they can pull that one off. So really it's going to be a matter of, I could see this team winning either 6 or 7 games. It just depends on if they split with the Saints or if they're able to beat the Saints twice. They may have difficulty on the road against the Bears. I am going to predict that they will win 2 of those 3 games between the Saints, and Bears, and they will win 7 down the stretch. That may be ambitious of me, but I believe they will come up with 11 wins down the stretch. So that is going to be one of the bolder predictions I have, but I think a 7-1 future for, I do not give up on the voodoo that you do. I believe in that team, and I think at the end of this, they will be a factor in the playoffs. That defense is just too good, just averaging over 11 points a game. So now, just down the street, maybe they're borrowing the same New Orleans Superdome. Here are the New Orleans Saints, and they also are 4-4, and all of us pretty much had similar predictions between 8 wins, 9 wins, and 10 wins on the season. So let's take a look at the Saints. So the Saints are led by Alex Smith, and there's a lot of calls in the current NFL for Alex Smith to sit down and see what they have in Pat Mahomes, but they've not yet made that switch. 62% completion percentage for Alex Smith, 10 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions, so a very efficient year for Alex Smith. That's a rating of 86, not bad in this league especially. Lead running back is Terrence West with 5.2 yard per carry average and 684 yards. And their leading receiver is actually a receiver. That's a tight end. Once again, Jordan Reed, 54 carries, but only a 7.6 yard per carry average. Julian Edelman with 45 catches and a 10-yard average. Deep threat, 18 yards per catch for Philip Dorsett. So let's take a look at this club. They have scored a fair amount of points, 204, so they're average over 25 a game, but they're also allowing close to 24 per contest. So let's see what the second half holds for the Saints opponent-wise. So they have the Chargers, who looks to be a playoff team. They have the Bears twice, who look to be a playoff team. They have the Voodoo, who I believe is going to have a very strong season in the second half. They also have the Niners. They also have a couple of relatively easy opponents in the Cardinals and the Lions, but this is going to be a very, very rough schedule for them. In fact, the Bears, Voodoo, Chargers on the road. Well, I am going to predict a 3-win second half for the New Orleans Voodoo. I believe that the Voodoo will go 7-9. I'm sorry, the Saints, my bad. We'll go 7-9, which actually would match the prediction that Tom had, and Dennis had predicted them at 9-7. So now let's move on to St. Louis. 6-5 was the prediction from our panel of so-called experts, and right now they stand at 2-6. St. Louis has a win over the New Orleans Saints, and they lost to the Detroit Lions. So let us take a look at the Cardinals. So they've offensively challenged, 119 points per game, and they've allowed 176. So I bet the weapons probably are not going to be there. Well, there's Carson Palmer. Oh, I remember this now. Okay, so let's do a little bit more math here. Carson Palmer has thrown 411 passes in this 8-game season. If the math is going on in your head right now, you are realizing that Carson Palmer is averaging, and I quote, 51 throws per game. I don't have the NFL record book beside me, but I can almost guarantee you that an 800 pass season would pretty much obliterate any record that we have in modern day backyard football, probably even electric football. Nobody's thrown 800 passes in a season. But what's kind of interesting about this is that even though he's thrown a gargantuan amount of times, he's only thrown for 2,289 yards. So he's not even on pace to get a 5,000 yard season. And I guess that's reflected by the 5.6 yards per attempt. That's pretty mediocre. 11 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. When you're throwing the ball a million times a game, needless to say, there's not much room for running backs on your team. Chahadrick West with 75 carries, only a 3.7 yard per carry average. He's barely carrying the ball 9 times per game. He is catching the ball, just like everybody else is catching the ball. He does have 53 catches this season for a 7-yard per catch average. They do have one deep threat on this team with a 16.6 yard per catch average, and that's Tyler Lockett out of the Seattle Seahawks. Again, interesting. There's an outside shot that they will have a 1,000-yard receiver, but they are spread among, it's a good shot, actually, 494, 459, 453. One of these guys is probably going to get a 1,000-yard season, but they're all spread over 4 main players, a running back, and 3 wide receivers. Jacob Tamme is their leading tight end. So St. Louis is having a hard time scoring the ball. Their defense is not bad, actually, at 176. It's in the middle of the pack. Let's take a look at the rest of their season. So for the rest of the season, Detroit Lions, who is winless, the Cleveland Browns, who have a couple of wins, the Oklahoma Outlaws, who have a couple of wins. Then you're facing Miami, Shreveport, the Bears, Voodoo, and the Saints. I am looking at probably 2 wins here. I say 2 wins for this club down the stretch. Actually, I tell you, I'm going to change that. No, I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep that at 2 wins down the stretch. They will get 2 out of 3 wins between, I don't believe they'll win any of the other games, but it'll be between Oklahoma, Cleveland, and Detroit. I say they will get 2 wins out of those 3. And that will give them 4 wins for the season. At the early part of the year, we had predicted 5 wins, and 6 wins. And now we come to the winless Detroit Lions, who stand at 0-9. They have what looks to be the largest point differential in the league, and they do. Phoenix is very close, but there's a 130-point difference between the amount of points in which they have scored, which stands at 138, and the amount of points they have let up, which is 268. That's a lot of points. They have had 9 games so far, and they're averaging just a tick under 30 points per contest allowed. So let's take a look at this club and see what the future holds, because obviously that future is not going to extend to this year. Now, they do have Phillip Rivers, who is underperforming this season. 14 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, and also less than 50% completion percentage. But the sun will come up tomorrow for this club for a couple of reasons, and we're looking right at him. Phillip Rivers is having a much better season for the Chargers, who are super hot right now and look destined to make the playoffs, where they've surely got the inside track to it. And Todd Gurley in Los Angeles is having a resurgent season. So he's going to have two great cards next year that he may decide to move in a trade or this club is going to be better next year. There's no question offensively they're going to be better, but if he wants to improve the defense, maybe he deals those two and goes young. It doesn't look like too young a team as it appears. So we'll see. But Gurley is doing everything for this team right now. And his stats are pretty close to what they were in real life. He's only averaging 3.9 yards per carry. And he's had 57 catches, so he's their leading wide receiver. So he's on his way to a 100-catch season, 8 yards per catch. Their leading receivers, as far as being dangerous, would be Travis Benjamin, 29 catches, 7 touchdowns. Excuse me, but this defense, wow. It's a mess. It's clearly a mess, and there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done. So they are looking at obviously at 0-9, they're in the driver's seat as far as that number one pick. There's some quality cornerbacks in this league. There's some great defensive line players as well. So maybe he decides to go defense. Maybe he trades down for a team that's needing a quarterback and gets some extra picks. But looking down the stretch, they did have a game that could have been a winnable one, but it was on the road to Tampa Bay, and they lost 27-7. They do have a couple of opponents here at home. St. Louis is not having a great season, so there's a possibility there. Probably won't beat the Voodoo. Probably will not beat the Bears on the road. Will not beat the Dolphins. Will not beat the Saints on the road. Will not beat the Voodoo. I do not believe this team will be winless. I think they will split one of the games against the Browns or the Cardinals, so I will give them a record of 1-15. At the early part of the season, we had predicted him with 3 wins, and 2 wins. So that, my friends, is the American Football Conference. I have completed the first part of this preview, and like I said, I was going to try to get this thing done in an hour, so I'm going to wrap up the AFC tonight. I will be back for an NFC recap and a preview, and we'll be able to rip through that even quickly. We won't have a review. We'll just go straight into the schedule and make predictions for the second half. So this is my first half broadcast. I hope you enjoyed it. A little long in the tooth. I tried to do my best as I could to get this thing moving, and we'll do our best to get tomorrow's broadcast moving even more quickly. It's a pleasure to bring this to you. It's an honor to be in this league. I enjoy this league immensely and have had a lot of fun and met a lot of great friends. And even if my team only wins 2 games the entire season, it still has been a blast. And thank you for listening tonight. And I hope that you enjoyed this broadcast, and we will see you soon with the NFC predictions. Have a great evening.